played at Carolina and froze his rear end off last weekend up there watching his former team, the Buffalo Bills. But he was in a suite, so he's fine. He wasn't really that cold. They had heaters in there and hot coffee and the whole 9 yards.
I'm glad you feel so bad for me, Jamie. I'm glad you feel so bad for me.
Welcome in, gentlemen. Nice to see you. Thanks to John Whittle for joining us in that last segment. A lot to get to. Pat, we'll get to some playoff stuff with you here just a little bit, and we'll get into the matchup for Carolina and Illinois. I doubt you've really studied Illini football over the last 24 hours. So we're not going to pin you down on that necessarily. That's
I know one piece of Illinois
the wide receivers coach, right?
My good buddy Justin Stepp, and he's done a really good job with those receivers there. And I've been following them just because of Stepp, but not.
Well, he just took a hit. The best receiver he's got is opting out.
I mean, that's going to be the world we live in right now, right? If your bowl game doesn't mean anything in these top 12 games, I mean, I don't want to say it, but I'm going to say it because that's just who I am. But like LaNorris would be an idiot to play in this bowl game until he has his NIL contract laid out for next year.
Yeah.
Right.
You're an idiot. We're going to scratch that from the record, but I hear you, man. Thanks a lot for dooming us next hour and 55 minutes.
I'm a player guy, right? I mean, I was a player myself, but if I were him, I wouldn't sign a contract.
Oh, sweet Jesus.
Sorry.
Anything that comes in this chat box today, we're going to forward to you.
Something tells me LaNorris is going to get paid. I don't think. I think he's going to be just fine.
He should have an interim bridge contract and then one that leads him into next year.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's already taken care of. If what I understand to be true is true.
Good.
But all right, Pat. Let's talk about Dow because he's headed to Boone. Great start to be a head coach. You get your first opportunity in a place like Boone, North Carolina. They expect to win. It's a neat town. They play in a good league. That's a great opportunity for him. So congratulations to Dow Loggins. We're gonna come at this from a little bit of a different angle because obviously Mike Shula is on staff. Mike and what he's done in the NFL and collegiately, and then this is a good job now being the OC at Carolina for a multitude of reasons. We'll let you explain, but I want you to explain to our audience. I'm gonna ask you what I think is a simple question. You're a football guy, so you can answer it better than anybody. What is South Carolina's offense? What type of offensive system do they run?
I mean, we're a quarterback run game RPO team. I mean, that's kind of what my opinion would be of who we've been when we've seen success is, LaNorris can drop back and sling it, but he's better when he's on the move. And you see majority of our explosive plays happen when he breaks the pocket, whether that be in a scramble or in some sort of keeper game of trying to break the pocket. So, I mean, I would say whoever the offensive coordinator is, they're going to step into a good situation because your quarterback, you've seen the development over the last 12 games. I think the portal is going to be a thing of beauty for South Carolina. I don't know many players that would not want to come to South Carolina to play with LaNorris Sellers. Almost the entire offensive line coming back. From a receiver standpoint, like we didn't have a clear-cut number one receiver this past year. I would imagine we're going to have a lot to choose from here coming up when the portal kicks up. Running back position is going to be up for grabs. I mean, Oscar Attaway will be coming back, and he showed some pretty good life there in that Clemson game. So, I mean, he's going to step in and be the one unless there's somebody else that can come challenge him for that spot. No, I think it's going to be an attractive job. Obviously, there's only – how many teams are in the SEC now? 16? Yeah, there's only 16 of these jobs out there, only 32 NFL jobs out there, and I would say those are probably the only other better positions to have. So it's going to be – I think we're going to have a lot of interest, and with Shane having a success, and I would imagine he has a long-term contract in hand that is – as safe as can be at this point after winning SEC Coach of the Year, that it would make a lot of sense for whether a stable coach who's been there, done that, or a young upcoming next wizard. So I think it's going to be really exciting. I think the future is bright right now, and the future's bright going forward.
What, and you know Shane incredibly well. What have you learned about what he wants in an offensive coordinator? And again, this could be Mike Shula. We don't know yet, but obviously Marcus Satterfield was the first pick, Dowell being the second pick. Shula is an offensive coordinator himself. He's been on the field all year coaching LaNorris from the sidelines. The one thing about Dowell Loggins, just to preface this one more time, is look what he had to do this year with a quarterback who's different, a little bit different from Spencer, right? And how he had to adjust. What do you know about the characteristics and traits that Shane Beamer looks for in a play caller?
I mean, I can't speak for him, obviously, but I would imagine he's going to look to somebody that has had experience with a running quarterback. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing that's going to be out there, and a guy who, you know, thinks outside the box. I think, you know, we had our frustrations with Marcus Satterfield, and in the last 4 games, it was like, holy smokes, like he's the greatest play caller ever. And then same thing with Dowell Loggins, right? I mean, last year we went 5-7. We scored points. I would say the defense was probably more about an issue last year than this year. But then, you know, the first 6 games, everyone was calling for Dowell's head. Like, winning makes everything better. So if you can find a guy that comes in here and win, everything is fine and dandy. But I think from a premise of what you're looking for someone with experience who's worked with a running quarterback. Like Shula just came from Buffalo. They got a pretty good one, pretty similar size, speed, and intangibles to LaNorris Sellers. Like, he worked with Josh. So that was a match made in heaven. Now, does Shula want to be the position coach for offensive coordinator and run point on recruiting in college football right now at South Carolina?
Great question.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't. But that's for him. I mean, I think if you can keep him in a role that he has right now where he doesn't have to do all the recruiting stuff, granted, I bet he's helping with recruiting just because he has the eye and he's been there, done that, NFL. But I don't know. I mean, Sat was very difficult first 18 games of his career here in South Carolina, and then he blew it up the last couple of games. I mean, Dowell was pretty level. I mean, we got a little bit better as season went on both years, and in the last 6 games, you went all 6, and LaNorris is playing the way he's playing. So, I think that either way, I do hate that coaching turnover. It makes it difficult for growth and kind of building the team together, everybody being in the same system multiple years, it helps. So hopefully whoever comes in can run a pretty similar shop to what Dowell was running, because we can tell that LaNorris is comfortable in it. The offensive line's comfortable in it. Receivers have played in it. So hopefully that makes sense. I know it's a lot.
No, it does. And I'm glad that you said that, because obviously Mike has worked with Cam Newton when he was with the Panthers. I mean, he's been around, he knows his league. He's been around, he's done those things. I'm not advocating for Mike Shula or anything like that. We're just discussing it because there's a good chance he might be calling plays in the bowl game. Even if not, he'll still be here. We talk, and I want to make sure that Mike is in on this here too. We talk very often in college football about not hiring guys based on one player, right? Like, you don't want to hire this guy to recruit that guy. You don't want to hire this guy just because this guy's on your team, whatever the case is. But that conversation's a little bit different here this go around, because this is a kid who's going to be on Heisman Trophy lists next season, starting in January. The early lists that are coming out, we just confirmed this on Friday with our Vegas guy. He will be on a bunch of Heisman lists. He's been one of the best players in the country. And if you want to continue with all the change that is in college athletics, if there's one thing that's consistent, it's the fact that the sport is inconsistent. You can't count on anything anymore year in and year out. So now that you have this kid, and you mentioned how attractive it will be in the portal, I'm sure Shane Beamer is probably hearing from offensive coordinator candidates he never even thought he'd hear from, simply because LaNorris Sellers is your starting quarterback. And South Carolina won 9 games. It's not like he's a quarterback for a crappy team. They're a good football program.
Yeah.
So with all of that said, what I'm asking you here, you just kind of laid out Mike and whom he's worked with Josh up in Buffalo and Cam, et cetera, you wonder where Shane Beamer draws that line, right? As far as hiring a guy who's right for the program or hiring a guy who's right for LaNorris Sellers, or if they have that perfect fit, who's right for both.
Yeah, well, I mean, whoever it is, like, it has to be a cultural fit for what Shane's doing. I mean, and that's, I think, is probably the utmost. I think that is one on the board. The guy has to fit the mold for South Carolina and the culture that Shane's built here over the last 4 years. And then 2 is, can this guy adapt an offense that LaNorris Sellers will thrive in? Because it's a quarterback-driven league, whichever way you put it, middle school, high school, college, NFL. The best teams have the best quarterbacks. It's just the way it goes. So, I mean, and Shane's done a great job of hiring here. Like, it was a first-time head coach 4 years ago. And I feel like, when he was hiring that first initial staff, like, he did a pretty good job. A lot of those guys are still around. So
good point.
He is SEC Coach of the Year. I mean, all the accolades are right in front of you. And I would imagine if I were to text him now, hopefully he would be like, Pat, I'm doing something. I'm trying to find who's going to be here next.
Or he'd text you back tomorrow.
Yeah. But he's like, it's a busy job. And on top of recruiting and everything he does, he's putting together a program that he thinks is going to have its best chance to succeed. And I mean, he's done that. He's won 8 games, won 9 games, going on 10 this year. It's only been done, 4 times in school history, double-digit wins. So what he's built here is, as you can tell, in 4 years is kind of a large window from a coaching resume. It's pretty sustainable. So I'm excited for what's ahead. I'm excited for the bowl game. I'm excited for, this 12-team playoff is pretty stinking cool, although there's a lot of flaws in it. But I'm excited.
Yeah, well, if there's one thing he doesn't do well, he needs to get his vocals right. Elliott sounds way better than him when he's got a microphone in front of his face, based on what we saw with Darius and Patrick the other night. That was Shane's got to get in there and get into that studio on campus and work on those chords. You mentioned something with the playoffs, so we're gonna get your thoughts on that here in a minute. But yeah, this is going to be the 5th opportunity, or this could be the 5th time in school history where Carolina wins double-digit games, Pat. That's it, which is just wild. And we talked to John about the fact that is a point of emphasis in this locker room. And it does seem like, at least as it stands today, that most of those kids understand that, which means that they understand the culture here, which means what you just said is correct. Shane has done a good job in building that and explaining that to his kids. The bowl experience you played in the SEC championship game and then went to the Peach Bowl, which at that point in time, Carolina was for how long were we trying to get invites to the Peach Bowl? Yep. And then y'all went there and got beat by Florida State.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Well, I didn't play in the game. I mean, had I played in the game, maybe it would have been differently.
Yeah, it's true.
But this whole experience here, the next few weeks for this football program, if they do win 10 games, how far do you think that can take them in the offseason?
Well, I'm going to kind of step in too. It's like we won 10 games. Vegas expected us to, 4.5? Was the line opening going into season? We had one of the strength of schedule after the season was 15th. And then going into the season, I want to say it was one of the 5 hardest schedules going into the season. Of the 12 games, I want to say 8 to 9 of our opponents were preseason ranked in the top 25. So, I mean, to see what Shane's done in a year where everybody counted us out, I mean, I'm guilty. I thought we were going to win 6 or 7 games this year. I did not see us winning 9, maybe 10. So, he is – what he's doing is working. He's a heck of a recruit. He works his tail off. He's very personable. I think from a funding standpoint with NIL, he's built – the infrastructure is pretty much built. And now it's here. Let's just continue to take off with it.
So if they win the bowl game, what do you think that'll do for them in the offseason?
I mean, it opens up. I mean, the
portal. Does it have the impact it used to have, a bowl win?
Yeah, I mean, winning 10 wins culturally with recruiting, with NIL, with donor money, like that's everybody. That's the big piece is money talk. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see who plays in the bowl game, who doesn't play from a senior standpoint. Like it's also that legacy piece of being one of 5 teams, captains on 5 teams, starter on 5 teams that won 10 games. So, it'd be interesting to see how everything shakes out. I mean, Shane knows how to rally the troops. So I imagine we'll have a really good showing at the bowl game, and we'll have guys opt in and want to play for Shane Beamer, for their brothers. Like this is a tight-knit football team that plays their butts off week in and week out. So I don't think there's going to be many surprises of sit-outs with this group.
I don't think so either. We're going to your backyard down there. My reservations are at the Point, which is where they will hold the pep rally as well. What I mean, outside of Disney World and Mickey Mouse and SeaWorld, et cetera, as the month goes along, you're going to have to give our fan base some things to do in Orlando that may be a little bit off the radar.
Shoot. Head to Altamont Springs. Go to the DiMarco residence. We got a nice pool in the backyard. Got a TV on the patio. Mom and Dad's place down there. But we're
what's that address, Pat? I missed that. So say that again for the listeners.
I could go back. I could give you my birth address, and they'd pull up to that house and be like, "Oh, where do people fit?"
This guy.
I promise you, if you give it, people are going to show up at your door right now that are listening. So please pass it along.
Yep, not going to happen. But we, so I was talking with Kirsten last night and talking to my parents this morning of trying to coordinate. We were planning on after Christmas of going down and visiting Kirsten's dad down in Miami, and then on our way back up, knowing the bowl games in Orlando now, I move everything a day forward and try to get back to Orlando around the 30th to go to the game on the 31st.
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine Disney and all the parks are going to be absolute mayhem. 30th, 31st, 1st, 2nd. So maybe somehow pop over to the parks with the kids. But no, it'll be a lot of fun. I got a lot of friends in Winter Park, that area, and that's close to where the bowl site's at. So we lived in our own little bubble in Altamont Springs, which is about 10 miles north of downtown, 8 miles north of downtown. So we didn't explore the parks much unless we had to because of all the chaos down there.
We'll be staying like at the Point there. We're like 2 miles from SeaWorld. I think that's going to be our destination. Maybe on the
SeaWorld's good now too. We actually went there last year with my parents. SeaWorld's very fun. Good roller coasters, all that stuff.
All right. Well, speaking of roller coasters, that's the CFP. You mentioned that you thought there were some flaws. Well, give us your synopsis.
If the head-to-head matchup is as important as it seemed based on the rankings, South Carolina being behind both Alabama and Ole Miss when they were the hotter team, in this day, like when all the rankings were put out, like how the hell is SMU ahead of Clemson? They just went head-to-head and lost to them. And I get it, 9-3 versus, I guess 11 or 10-3 versus 11-2. But I mean, head-to-head, if that means something, I don't know. And like, is SMU really worthy of being in the college football playoff? Like, are the actual 12 best teams in the country in the college football playoff?
Of course. Saban said that yesterday.
And I will say, like I need grace. Everybody needs grace in this world. So, I mean, this was the first year doing this. So there's a lot of flaws and a lot of mishaps. But, I mean, either way, they put together a really cool system that this year is going to be extremely entertaining from Friday, December 20th through when's the finals?
January 20th.
January 20th. So we got a full month of a lot of fun, interesting football games that are – so, I mean, is it perfect? No. Is it going to be exciting? And am I going to be glued to the TV watching it? Yes. And like I said earlier, money talks. So this is generating just a few dollars, I think.
What do you think about the top 4 seeds being the highest ranked conference champions? Like, should Boise State have the 3 seed?
No, Boise and Arizona State. I mean, it should be the 4 best teams in the country. Now, I will say, like, this works out in Texas's favor. So Texas, if and after they beat Clemson, they're going to beat the crap out of them. They'll play
Arizona State. who is hot. I'll give them some credit.
I mean, Penn State's playing SMU. SMU is probably the worst team in the playoff. And then they go to play Boise State. I mean, I think it kind of Tennessee, Ohio State, like that. That's the, and then the Indiana Notre Dame, like that's kind of, they got shafted a little bit. Higher rankings are going to have to play one of the higher seeds when it push comes to shove in 1 to 5 or 1 to 8.
I think based on the news we got this morning, and again we'll get more later on today. If this UCL injury to Carson Beck is serious, not that Carson Beck's been playing lights out football by any stretch of the imagination, but if this is going to keep him out, and that there's a strong likelihood that could happen, Penn State all of a sudden has a pretty sweet ride to the college football playoff national championship because
you say that, but Gunnar Stockton was the one that won the game. It wasn't Carson Beck didn't play good enough in the first half to win the game.
Well, I hear you, but did you really think Gunnar Stockton looked good in that ball game? Because I didn't.
He was accurate with his throws. He got the ball out on time. He didn't lose the game for him.
No, he tried to. He tried to throw that ball.
He had one lousy pick. There's no doubt about that. But I thought overall he showed a hell of a lot of pull.
I thought he made
very careful with him. Yeah, I thought they were very careful with him. Completed 12 passes for 70 yards.
You get put into the SEC championship game, and it's like your first meaningful snaps of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a good point.
I mean, and now they have what? They're not playing until Wednesday, January 1st. They got almost a month to prep with this guy and cater to his strengths.
Yeah.
And I think number one strength is hand the ball off to that running back is pretty damn good.
ETN.
Well, the receivers drop every other pass, so that's another problem. No matter who's playing quarterback for Georgia,
they have 100 tight ends. Golly,
yeah, they do.
They're getting 3 tight end sets in on third down, like 3rd and 8, and they're in 3 tight end sets. It's pretty impressive.
You were on the program at Carolina when we were recruiting Oscar Delp
and Lawson Lucky. Would have loved both of them, or just one of them.
Which first round matchup are you most intrigued by?
I mean, Ohio State, Tennessee.
Okay. You think the Vols have a chance up there?
I do. I mean, Tennessee, like if everything's clicking on all cylinders and they can get a couple explosive plays early, they're a team that plays with such pace that they can wear a defense down, but they can't do that from behind. I mean, I'm excited to watch Texas beat the crap out of Clemson too.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. There's no doubt. Texas is an 11-point favorite in that ball game.
Yeah, I mean, those spreads are big. 7.5, 11, 9, and 8.
Right.
Are those good matchups? In the SEC, they're all 3 to 4 point, like one way or the other.
Yeah.
If we're getting the 12 best teams in, is there really that kind of spreads out there?
No, it's not. It's an invitational.
Right.
But yeah, Ohio State can't stop the run. And that's basically what Tennessee does. They run it. They just run it really fast. That's a bad matchup for the Buckeyes. But, you know, in the world of fantasy that the committee lives in, Ohio State is a lower seed than Notre Dame and Penn State, who, I mean, Penn State's ahead of Notre Dame. They've lost 2. Notre Dame's only lost 1. Granted, it was Northern Illinois, but Penn State's played nobody. I don't, you know, the seedings are all jacked up. And
well, I mean, Penn State are all jacked up too. Like that's part of the problem too. Is like, look at somebody was saying who has Texas beat all year? A&M, who's not ranked anymore.
Tennessee has 1 win over Alabama. That's it.
Look, Texas, honestly, we talked about this last week, Pat. You could poke holes in virtually every resume here. That's why it was so mind-boggling that some were just absolutely cemented because of the number of games they've won. Texas obviously is a really good football team, but they had the weakest schedule in the SEC. And you could argue that's a direct reflection of that 11-2 record, 7-1 in the regular season. Now, both those losses are to Georgia. But as you pointed out, I mean, who else did they play that even approached the status of the Bulldogs?
That is why Kirby basically dunked on Greg Sankey with Greg Sankey 15 feet to his left.
Yeah, that was something.
That was awkward. That was Kirby's point.
Kirby's like kind of like Coach Spurrier-esque. He's going to say what he wants to say.
And he's got enough cachet with 2 national championships in the bag to do it. But, I mean, he basically was saying, you send us to Ole Miss, Texas, and Alabama, not to mention Tennessee. And, I mean, there's some tough home games. Clearly there was a difference in schedule strength within the league, which I think it's if you want to highlight the biggest problem, no matter what we do with this playoff, the biggest problem for conference commissioners alike is trying to even out those 8-9 conference games, because there's a clear disparity in leagues like the SEC and the Big Ten and even the ACC with SMU. I mean, SMU avoided almost everybody with a pulse in the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Yeah,
that's how they got here.
But I mean, over the last 5 years, wasn't that the SEC East versus the SEC West too?
Right. It was the JV versus the varsity.
I mean,
there's some buzz about divisions maybe coming back. I don't.
But I don't know if that's the solution either.
Shocker. Yeah.
I like I said, if you're gonna have imbalanced schedules, that's the only way you could determine the top 2 teams in the standings getting to Atlanta is by record. I mean, that's in the million tiebreakers they have. By the way, Carolina beating LSU, they would have been in Atlanta based on like the 5th tiebreaker with Georgia.
Yeah.
It would have come down to Carolina outscoring conference opponents by 23. Georgia was by 12. And Carolina would have gotten it. But that was like the 5th tiebreaker. So if you're going to do it that way, fine. The champion needs to get the auto bid, and the other bids need to be determined at the conference level. You have a guaranteed number of bids, and let the conference decide based on a point system, just like they do in high school. That way, if you have a bad schedule, you can still get in if you keep winning because you get points for winning, but you're not necessarily getting in if you just coast. High schools do it all over the country. High school football playoff brackets are set with points all over America, and if you're going to do it that way, do it. I mean,
does it make sense for South Carolina to play Clemson anymore?
Well, no, not based on what the committee tells us, but we all know that won't happen. But what will happen is there will be a lot of non-conference big time matchups that they're going to look at this and they're going to go, we don't need to expand to 9 games.
Yeah.
If the committee looked at this properly, the Clemson game could have taken Carolina over the top. So I will 100%. Say in other years, the Clemson game is a valuable data point if Carolina wins it, particularly if Clemson stays relevant, which this year they obviously are.
Right.
If you didn't have here's what I've done a lot of thinking on this, and I'm trying to really think of into the heads of 13 people that I don't believe should be on the committee. What did Carolina in most of all is the dual head-to-head. In other words, if there were 3 9-3 teams and Carolina never played Alabama, instead their third loss was to Missouri, and it's 9-3, 9-3, 9-3, and they'd still have a head-to-head loss against Ole Miss, but all those other metrics, more road wins, no bad losses, etc. Carolina's in.
Yeah,
it's the dual head-to-head that they just couldn't get past, no matter how hard they perceivably tried. But my point is, that if you didn't have the dual head-to-head and you had the 9-3, 9-3, 9-3, and then Carolina goes to Clemson and beats a top 15 Clemson team, that gets them in over the hump. So that still would have, should have, could have been a very valuable game on the schedule.
Yeah,
great point. Pat, we're 12:32, so I know we got to get you out of here, man. Any parting shots here for Carolina? Kind of ran the gamut with you today. No game to talk about, but any parting shots before we let you go?
No, I mean, it's an exciting opportunity for South Carolina to get to double-digit wins for the 5th time in school history. Playing in an awesome bowl game down in Orlando. It's going to be fun for all families, fans alike. I'm thrilled to see what comes about with the offensive coordinator position, what we do, how we do it. I trust Shane. He's going to make a great decision and a great hire like he has the last 4 years.
No question.
And hopefully we can have a good showing in the bowl game and everybody play. LaNorris can get his deal done before the game happens, and all that stuff. I'm just kidding. Figured I had to bring that up again.
I I was going to
But-
I didn't hear it.
But no, I mean, exciting times ahead. And, forever to thee.
And we have Tailgate Talks coming out on Wednesday. Who's the guest this week, or are we going to keep them guessing?
We're going to keep them guessing. That's been a huge hit. Social media is like a thing of beauty when you throw a question mark out there and puzzle people. When we did the Pharaoh Cooper throwing a quarterback, hearing some of those guesses were awesome. And coolest part about it is like, so Dakota, who does the production for us, went to do like erase the image of the person and tried to trace them. And he sent it back to me, and I'm like, that's terrible. And he's like, well, you do better. I'm like, I can't do better, but my 8-year-old son can. So Weston basically has this app on the iPad where I'll send him the picture, and he'll trace the outer person and then color the jersey in with covering everything up. And that is one of his chores now. So making his bed, cleaning his room, helping me take out the trash, and helping Tailgate Talk. So he's an employee.
A cheap one, a very cheap employee.
Intern. Yeah. Careful with your nomenclature there, Pat.
We pay in candy.
yeah, exactly. Very cheap. Pat, thanks, man. Look forward to chatting with you next week, and then taking some time off for the holiday, brother.
Oh, I'm gonna plug this in real quick.
Yep.
Because you mentioned it, but like Dow Loggins, really excited for him. Dow's a great human being, has a great family. He's a great football coach too. So I'm excited to see what happens for him and his future going forward. His wife Beth and their 4 kids. I'm over the moon for them and their opportunity up at App State. Not too far away, so we'll remain in contact. I texted him yesterday. He texted me right back. So just a good human being, and I like when good stuff happens to good people.
I 100% agree with that. That's a great place for him to go get his head coaching career started. So best of luck to Coach Loggins. Well said. Thank you, Pat.